FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
One of the things that's been going on in recent months is that the conservative movement has been distancing itself from President Bush, saying he's not one of us, he's not really a true conservative. Bruce Bartlett, for example, who was involved in this debate, wrote a book called Imposter: How George W. Bush Betrayed the Reagan Legacy. And one of the arguments I try to make as carefully as I can in the book is to demonstrate that George Bush, in realm after realm, governed precisely in the ways the conservative movement has said he should govern, and that those actions have led to his most recognized failures. So, for example, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, everybody recognized that FEMA failed abysmally to do its job of helping people to respond to that disaster. Well, FEMA was a model agency and became a model agency in the 1990s under President Clinton. It reverted to its former state as basically what was called a turkey farm by adhering to the approach the Heritage Foundation said government agencies ought to adhere to, which is by appointing more political appointees throughout the government so as to gain control of the civil service. And indeed, the right for many, many years has pounded a drumbeat about the incompetence of people who work for government as careers, and that manifests itself in terms of how agencies ought to be governed by saying that what we need are political appointees so that we can privatize services, let the private sector do things that the government's done in the past, because the private sector is inherently more effective than government. We should devolve activities to the states. We should cut programs that the government does. And that's exactly what happened to FEMA very early on, even before Brownie took over under Joseph Albaugh. And that very directly led to the failures of FEMA. People left the agency. The people at the highest level were political appointees. And the Heritage Foundation, several months before Katrina hit, there was an article in the National Journal about politicization of government, and one of their chief staff people said about that whole approach to governing, they're doing exactly what we told them to do. And he seemed happy about that. He was pleasantly surprised. So that's FEMA, that's one example. Another example is the invasion of Iraq, which really followed the game plan of the Weekly Standard, the Project for a New America Century, right down the line. The concept, the underlying philosophy, which was dubbed by Bill Kristol benevolent hegemony, was a strategy that basically said other countries will recognize that it's in their best interest for the United States to exert its own best interest unilaterally, if need be, to deal with problems that the U.S. perceives as creating difficulties. Well, that philosophy had a great deal to do with lending support during the course of the build-up to the war. The conservative movement was very enthusiastic every step of the way. There was no hesitation about whether we should do that, and no questioning of any of the premises underlying it. I should mention, too, by the way, Heritage, the Project for a New American Century, all these institutions that support the ideas that we're talking about are all funded by the same handful of families, places like the Scaife family, the Bradley Foundation, the Olin Foundation, the Koch Foundation. These families all have the premise that government is bad. They are mainly libertarians. They're people who have made a lot of wealth, deeply hostile to taxes, extremely hostile to regulations. They created these institutions not because they believed in good government. They created them because they wanted to roll back government. And what happened over the course of recent decades is those institutions were enormously creative in figuring out how to sell ideas that would have that impact of rolling back government without saying that's what we're doing. So you have Social Security privatization, things like health savings accounts. Obviously, the politicization of government fits into that. There are a number of other examples. Quickly add a couple of more examples about the Bush administration. Abu Ghraib directly is an outgrowth of an approach to thinking about the executive branch that was developed in the Federalist Society, another sort of networking organization for lawyers that was funded by the same group of conservative thinkers. Obviously, the idea of tax cuts under pretty much any scenario you can think of as an idea that was supported uniformly by all the conservative think tanks, even though the previously successful policy of constraining government spending, pay-as-you-go limits were dropped with dispatch beginning in 2001 and thereafter. This is under a conservative Republican Congress as well. And that too contributed mightily to the significant increase in the deficit, as well as economic results that never lived up to any of the promises that were made about how the economy would benefit and how average families would benefit from the tax cuts. Each of the chapters in my book focuses on a particular idea, looks at its history, looks at its impact, and also tries to assess the arguments made by conservatives in the aftermath of those consequences, to really try to highlight the extent to which they are behind the failures that have arisen.